can, and please forgive the delay. We are just having back-to-back meetings here today, so we will be starting this meeting here in about 7 minutes. Thank you. SCCTV, are you ready? Thank you. Okay. I understand, trust me.
Clerk Hart, are we good to go?
Yes, we are.
All right. This is Commission President Hamdi Mohammed reconvening the special meeting of October 8th, 2024. The time is now 12 p.m. We're meeting in person today at the SEA Conference Center and virtually on Microsoft Teams. Clerk Hart, please call the roll for the commissioners in attendance.
Thank you. Beginning with Commissioner Calkins.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Fellman.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Hasagawa.
Present.
Thank you. And Commissioner Mohammed.
Present.
Thank you. We do have a quorum established.
Wonderful. Just a few housekeeping rules before we begin. For everyone in the meeting room, please remember to turn off your cell phones. You don't have to turn it off, but at least put it to silent. For anyone participating on Microsoft Teams, please mute your speakers when not actively speaking or presenting. Please keep your cameras off unless you are a member of the commission or the executive director participating virtually, or you are a member of the staff in a presentation mode and are actively addressing the commission. Members of the public addressing the commission during public comment may turn on their cameras when their names are called, and will turn them back off again as they conclude their remarks. For anyone at the dais today, please turn off the speakers on any computers and silence your devices. Please also remember to address your request to be recognized to speak through the chair, and wait to speak until you have been recognized. You'll turn on your microphones on and off as needed. All these items noted here will ensure that we have a smoother meeting. Thank you all. All votes casted today will be taken by the roll call method so that it is clear for anyone participating virtually how votes are casted. Commissioners will say aye or nay when their names are called. We are meeting on the ancestral land and waters of the Coast Salish people, with whom we share a commitment to steward these natural resources for future generations. This meeting is being digitally recorded and may be viewed or heard at any time on the Port's website and may be rebroadcasted by King County Television. Now, please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all so much. The first item of business today is approval of the agenda. As a reminder, if a commissioner wishes to make a general comment for or against an item on the consent agenda, it is not necessary to pull the item from the consent agenda. Rather, a commissioner may offer general supporting comments or opposing comments later in the meeting once we get to that part on the agenda. However, it is appropriate at this time if a commissioner wants to speak or ask a question of staff or wishes to have a dialogue on a consent agenda item to request that item to be pulled for a separate discussion. Commissioners, are there any items to be pulled from the consent agenda or any motions to rearrange the order of today's meeting?
Point of order, Madam President.
Go ahead.
Regarding item 8C, authorization for the executive director to convey a port-owned canine to its handler. I'm wondering why this is before the commission for consideration.
Thank you, Commissioner Hasagawa. Executive Director Metric or staff, does someone want to speak to that item?
To elaborate, there's no financial cost associated with it, and I don't very well expect that we could submit a canine to questioning its handler is here, but I don't see why this is,
I believe it's a transfer. They consider the canine property, and I believe that's,
then there should be a value indicated.
Sir, you are correct. That is why. May I sit?
Yeah, please sit and introduce yourself for the record. Thank you.
My name is Cy Hollinger. I'm a sergeant with the Canine Program with the Port Police Department.
Welcome. Please proceed.
So, sir, you are correct. It is an item, an owned item by the port, and so it needs a disposition from the commission for that. As far as an amount you asked about, that amount I don't know. It's
I think dogs are priceless, so that's absolutely goes over our amount. So,
sir, that was the right
That's a
answer.
political
Absolutely.
answer.
Yeah. There was an associated cost with the canine originally when it was purchased over 10 years ago, and now, fast forward, it's 10 years later. It is at its retirement age for it, and so that's why we're requesting to have it formally retired.
And I get that, but I just don't get why that needs our approval if there's no cost associated with it. So it's just a point of order. I'm wondering.
I'll just say I can follow up and check the delegation of authority and how that fits in.
All right, well, I'll refrain from removing it from consent for any specific purpose, but it's something to keep in mind.
Welcome, Director Dan.
Dan Thomas, Chief Financial Officer. I think I can help here. Port policy prohibits surplusing property to employees without authorization of the Port Commission.
There you have it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Fellow.
And Madam Commission President, through the President to Commissioner Hasagawa, also we have an RCW reference to 5308090 for conveyance of that personal port property.
Acknowledged. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Hart, for those additional details. Commissioner Fellman.
And not to be glib, though, it takes a lot of money to get a dog trained on multiple sources to detect, and they truly are invaluable to the security of the airport. So that's a huge thing, and I greatly appreciate the fact that we could even talk about it, because dogs are great beyond just being man's best friend.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I can just say we have unanimous support for dogs on this commission. All right. Are there any questions, comments related to the agenda today? Hearing none from my commissioners, I just want to quickly just speak on item 8D. I'm not pulling the item, but I want to just speak in support of the order amending the deadline for the Youth Maritime Career Launch Program, and just want to thank the staff that is leading this program. I did participate in their graduation this year. They're doing incredible work, and it was really inspiring to talk to those young people and to hear how excited they are about the maritime industry and their interest in finding pathways to permanent jobs in those industries. And so I'm looking forward to continuing to support this program, and I really appreciate the briefings that I've received on it, and I think the amendment makes total sense to really be thoughtful and strategic about the direction of the program. And so thank you to the OEDI team for the work that you all are doing. All right. So commissioners, the question is now on approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Great. The motion has been made and seconded. Is there any objection to approving the agenda as presented? Hearing none, the agenda is approved as presented. Thank you, commissioners.
So I can go ahead and read the next item into the record.
Please do, Clerk Hart. Thank you.
Thank you. This is special orders of the day. It's agenda item 4A, proclamation declaring the second Monday in October as Indigenous Peoples' Day for the Port of Seattle.
Executive Director Metrick, would you like to introduce the item?
yes, President Mohammed. Yes, Commissioners, Indigenous Peoples' Day is a holiday in the United States dedicated to celebrating and honoring Indigenous American peoples and recognizing their rich histories and cultures. Observed on the second Monday in October, this day acknowledges the painful experiences Indigenous communities have endured while also celebrating their vibrant contributions. From public service and entrepreneurship to scholarship and the arts, Indigenous peoples have significantly shaped our nation, culture, and society, and I am proud to support the proclamation before you today.
Great.
And we have a number of presenters here today. But I see Roxanne Murphy, our head of senior tribal relations, and Tanisha Simmons also with us today. So I don't know if we have other. I'm not
We
sure.
can read it into the record if that would help.
Yeah, please do. Thank you.
Okay,
Please
great.
proceed. Welcome.
Afternoon, Commission, our leaders, and everybody tuning in today. My name is Roxanne Murphy. I am a member of the Nooksack Indian Tribe, and I serve as the Senior Manager of Tribal Relations for the Port of Seattle. Just wanted to afford Tanisha the opportunity to quickly introduce herself too.
Good afternoon. I'm Tanisha Simmons. I'm a financial analyst for the Aviation Division, also one of the lead members of our Native American Committee, among other ERGs as well. And I'm here to represent, I'm also Aleut from Alaska and African American.
So we're very excited to be here to read this proclamation into the record, and I'll go ahead and get started. Whereas the Port of Seattle recognizes that Indigenous peoples of the lands that would later become known as the Americas have occupied these lands since time immemorial, and whereas the Port of Seattle recognizes that King County is built upon the homelands and villages of the Indigenous people of this region, without whom the building of the country and the port would not have been possible. And whereas the Port of Seattle values the many contributions made to our organization through Indigenous people's knowledge, labor, technology, science, philosophy, arts, and the deep cultural contributions that have substantially shaped our region. And whereas the Port of Seattle has a responsibility to oppose systematic racism toward Indigenous people, which perpetuates high rates of poverty and income inequality, exacerbating disappropriate health, education, and social crisis. And whereas the Port of Seattle promotes closing the equity gap through formal tribal partnerships, proper concurrence, policies, and practices that reflect the experience of Indigenous peoples, ensuring greater access and opportunity, and honoring our nation's Indigenous roots, history, and contributions. And
Whereas the Port of Seattle is fortunate to have memorandums of agreement and ongoing partnership work with the Suquamish Indian Tribe and the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe, our Port of Seattle Native American Committee, and employees from tribes through the United States that work in various sections in our organization. And whereas many Port of Seattle leaders and departments are focused on improving tribal relations and shifting from transactions with tribes to legacy partnerships and relationships with the tribal sovereign nations that enrich our work and have lasting positive impacts on our personal lives. And whereas the Port of Seattle strongly supports the opportunity to celebrate the thriving cultures and values of the Indigenous people of our region and throughout the country. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Port of Seattle Commission declares the second Monday in October as Indigenous Peoples' Day for the Port of Seattle, which will be honored in 2024 on October 14th and every second Monday in October thereafter, and reaffirms the Port's commitment to promote the well-being and growth of our Indigenous partners and the Indigenous community.
just in closing, we would like to suggest that this proclamation would mean so much to the tribal members that are employed within the port, our MOA, Memorandum of Agreement, partnership tribes. And then also we want to support tribes everywhere, especially the urban Indians that live in King County. So Haishka, we thank you for considering this.
Chinangale.
Thank you both for reading the proclamation, and thank you for your leadership at the Port of Seattle. I will now open it up for comments from my colleagues, and I will start with Commissioner Fellman, who is sponsoring this proclamation today, I believe.
I was out of town when it was initiated, but I certainly was very strongly, one of the major issues I brought to the port was improving our tribal relations, and the fact that we have an executive that is pushed forward with our MOAs. It's a fantastic acknowledgement that we're getting it, and but it's always a learning lesson, and we will always step in it. And I think the more and more we show good intention when we do make mistakes, that folks will understand that it's not for anything but, good intention. And so I greatly appreciate you helping us articulate that. We always need a little credit in the bank before we go forward and make inevitable stumbles. And thank you for the ERG, and all our other employees at the port for helping us carry the torch. So thank you for your leadership in making it happen.
Thank you, Commissioner Fellman. Commissioner Calkins.
Very supportive of this proclamation, and also just taking a moment to share some of my own journey in understanding the both the history of the Port of Seattle vis-a-vis the indigenous peoples of the region and the steps we need to take to continue to mend some of those historical errors. Part of it for me is just simply doing the historical reading, and I would encourage everyone who has a moment as we either celebrate this holiday or as we're thinking about it, is just take a little bit of time to learn the history. There's lots of amazing literature around the indigenous peoples of the Salish Sea, and the more you read and learn, I think the more urgent the need to address some of these historical wrongs becomes. So that's my exhortation to everyone. I'm committed to doing that myself, and so I'm grateful to get to vote on this proclamation today.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hasagawa.
Thank you so much for bringing forward this proclamation. Substantively, it's beautiful and deeply meaningful. The way it was read was powerful. I am pleased to express my strong support for this proclamation, which in its own is an opportunity for all of us to reflect as a port our connection to supporting and uplifting Indigenous peoples and Native American peoples specifically in the world, in our community, but right here in our own workforce. And so I do want to acknowledge, in addition to, I think, and I don't mean to say this word in any dismissive way, but in addition to a performative proclamation, I would just like to lift up some of the ways that we're trying to meaningfully support and uplift Native members of our workforce, including through and in our community. First and foremost, the memorandum of understanding that we have with the Muckleshoot Indian tribe and the Suquamish tribes. These are ways that we can codify when and how and on what issues we are engaging with and communicating with our tribal partners, bringing them into conversations proactively so that they're not in a reactive state to what we're doing as a special purpose government, recognizing them as sovereign nations with rights and titles. I also wanted to lift up the Women of Color assessment that acknowledges deep equity gaps that need to be addressed and filled. Pieces within our budget that look for opportunities to be able to fund FTEs and improvements in the way that we're actually paying and compensating members of our workforce in a way that is equitable. And I just want to acknowledge that the work is ongoing. If there's one thing that I've come to appreciate, it's that it's never done. As much progress as we think that we make, it's something that we always have to hold close and be intentional about. So thank you for this reminder. It is also a reason to celebrate all the contributions, the beautiful resiliency and the enduring legacy of the Native tribes that shape our landscape, our history, and our beloved port community. So thank you so very much for being here with this today.
Yeah, thank you, commissioners, and I echo those same sentiments, and just will add that our Indigenous community does play a critical role in also shaping our economy, our culture. When I think about environmental stewardship, so much leadership is being seen in all of those fronts and areas, from sustainable fishing practices to ensuring environmental stewardship. We learn from all of you consistently and hope to do better. And I'm proud of the work that is happening at the Port of Seattle to build better partnerships with our tribal community. There's intentional work that's happening. There's more work that we can do. We say a land acknowledgement at every commission meeting, but backing that acknowledgement with action is always the goal. And I see that we're working towards that consistently, and I see our staff doing that work. And I also just want to echo the same sentiments of my colleagues. It's important to acknowledge the history of injustice to our tribal communities, and today is a day to reflect on that, and to reflect on displacements, broken treaties, and discrimination, and to say that we will do better moving forward as a nation, as a country. And so I support this order today. Thank you for bringing it, this proclamation, for bringing it forward, and I'm looking forward to voting for it today. So with that said, I will ask Clerk Hart to please call for the vote.
Can we get a motion on the floor?
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Seconded.
The motion has been made and seconded. Clerk Hart, please call the roll.
Thank you. Beginning with Commissioner Fellman.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Calkins.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Hasakawa.
Aye.
Thank you. And Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you. 4 ayes, 0 nays for this item.
Thank you. Thank you all again. So the next item on our agenda is new business for the day. Clerk Hart, please read the first item into the record, and then Executive Director Metric will introduce the item.
Let's go ahead and go back to the bottom of page 9 for the Executive Director report.
Executive Director Metric, I skipped your report out, but I know that you have a lot of updates to share with us, so let's go back to that place, and
Thank
then
you.
I'll move us along. Thank you.
Thank you, President Mohammed. And good afternoon, Commissioners. I'd like to begin my remarks by saying Shana Tova to our Jewish colleagues who celebrated Rosh Hashanah last week and will be celebrating Yom Kippur later this week. While families celebrate, it is not lost on us that peace feels far away for many, particularly reflecting upon the one-year anniversary of the Hamas attack of October 7th. This has been a difficult year marked by a great deal of loss. We hold the people of the region in our thoughts and hope to see a resolution and peace soon. And during difficult times, we look to our values to guide us. Here at the Port of Seattle, we lean into our values: respect, anti-racism, integrity, stewardship, and excellence, to be an inclusive organization that supports all of our employees in the community. As noted earlier in our agenda, and we just heard now, next Monday is Indigenous Peoples Day. So I want to again thank all the presenters, Tanisha and Roxanne, for the reading of the proclamation and your remarks in support of it, and your vote to approve it as well. And this month, in addition, we also celebrate Filipino American Heritage Month. So these are great celebrations. Transitioning, I want to provide you an update on the Port's response to our cybersecurity incident, which is continuing in earnest. I just wanted to advise you that working with Kroll, a leading provider of risk and financial services, we intend to offer employees credit monitoring services. We are finalizing the contract details and expect to initiate these services soon. And this is a proactive step that we want to take out of an abundance of caution, because we're not sure, as we continue our assessment of what data the actor was able to obtain, and we're not sure if any employee data was affected. However, we want to take these actions proactively. The Port will provide notification if we do learn employee information may have been stolen. And I also want to recognize our ICT and information security teams who continue to make progress on a response and work very hard on restoring all of our systems across the Port. Turning our attention to operations, earlier this morning we shared a positive outlook for both our aviation and maritime divisions. A major highlight for our aviation division included the inaugural nonstop flight from Seattle-Tacoma International Airport to Manila by Philippine Airlines. This service marks the 8th new international service from SEA in 2024 and is a strong indicator for the growing demand at SEA. Last week, SEA also announced 11 new dining and retail concepts coming to SEA's Concourse C expansion area. Chili's, Buffalo Wild Wings, and Great State Burger are on the list, along with several local favorites moving to new locations in the airport, including Lady Yum and Sub Pop Records. Our award-winning airport and dining and retail program is dedicated to offering travelers shops, restaurants, and services that surpass their expectations in customer service, quality, variety, and affordability, all while embodying the unique spirit of the Pacific Northwest. We look forward to welcoming travelers to these new offerings soon. Commissioners, travelers leaving SEA this month will begin to notice that the Transportation Security Administration is implementing optional facial matching biometric technology. in order to assure that individual traversing through TSA checkpoint is the same person whose identification is being scanned. At the checkpoint, the TSA officer inserts the traveler's photo ID into the CAT-2 unit where the ID is scanned. A separate photo is taken of the traveler standing before the TSA officer. The two images are then compared and confirmed if matched. The TSA does not maintain a database of travelers, so the traveler's photo is never stored. Because this is a federal use of biometrics, the port does not have approval or authority over this implementation. However, it's required by the Port Federal Biometrics for Traveler Functions Policy, EX26. We worked at TSA to advocate for the use of this technology in a way that meets our biometric standards, and we are installing signs and information to ensure that passengers know that technology is optional. Commissioners, in other airport updates, the airport has reached a major milestone since our last meeting. The National Environmental Policy Act draft environmental assessment of the airport's Sustainable Aviation Master Plan, also known as the SAMP, will be available for public review on October 21st. Giving this advance notice of upcoming comment period is a commitment we made to the community at the beginning of this process. The SAMP work has been years in the making and is a critical step for the future of service at SEA. Congratulations to all involved in reaching this milestone. We're excited to say, in additional news, we're excited to share the transition to fluorine-free foam of our Port of Seattle Police Department's our facility is complete. That's aviation rescue, fire, and firefighting. Is complete. We are also able to partner with the King County Airport and Bellingham's firefighters to transition their fleets as well. Port Fire and Environmental have already welcomed visitors from Ecology, King County Wastewater Division, and Port leadership to observe the process, and hosted visitors from the University of Washington and multiple national airports to share our efforts in this transition and what we have learned to support others who are planning programs or are interested in PFAS removal technologies. And lastly, for aviation, SEA recently co-hosted and sponsored the Open Doors Organization Universal Access in Aviation 2024 conference. Open Doors Organization is a renowned nonprofit committed to ensuring that travel, tourism, and transportation are accessible to individuals with disabilities. At this year's biennial conference, our very own Heather Karch, who's with us today, was awarded the prestigious Disability Access Professional Award. This honor recognizes Heather's significant contributions to improving accessibility and equity in travel and the tourism industry. Her leadership and achievements have been acknowledged across the industry, and her role in aviation facilities have been pivotal in our mission to become the most accessible airport. Heather is here with us here today, and please join me in congratulating Heather on this well-deserved recognition. Congratulations, Heather, and thanks for all that you continue to do for us. On the maritime side, at the seaport, we've reached a major milestone when the Norwegian Bliss connected to clean electric shore power at Pier 66 the last Saturday in September. This initial test of the new shore power system marks the first time in our history that we've had 3 ships simultaneously connected to the Seattle City Light grid. We're very pleased by the partnership with Seattle City Light, Norwegian Cruise Line, Cruise Terminals International, Ports America, and the International Longshore and Warehouse Union Local 19, our port teams, and our contractors and suppliers whose hard work, flexibility, and perseverance help make this vision a reality. We're regarding cruise, we're on track to exceed our 1.7 million revenue passenger estimate for the year, and we'll have more to share and say about that after our season concludes on October 28th. Moving to today's commission meeting, I'd like to highlight a few staff presentations. Today you'll receive a briefing on the South King County Community Impact Fund. Since its creation, this fund has invested nearly $10 million into various economic development, environmental, and other projects in near airport communities. This briefing will further dive into the program's impact and our recommendations for its next iteration. In addition, similar to this morning's sessions on the aviation and maritime budgets, you'll receive a similar briefing on the Economic Development Division. And I'll have more to say about that during its introduction. So, Commissioners, this concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Director Metric, for those updates. Commissioners, are there any questions or comments? All right, I'll move us along in the agenda. We are now at our committee report, and Erica Chung, our strategic advisor, will provide that report. Erica, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Commission President Mohammed, Commissioners, and Executive Director Metric. I have one report for you today. The Highline Forum met on September 25th with Committee Co-Chair Des Moines Councilmember Mahoney presiding and Port Co-Chair Commissioner Fellman not in attendance. The City of Des Moines reported their hiring of a new city manager, Catherine Caffrey, starting November 1st, and new police chief, Ted Bowe. Updates were also shared on the Marina Steps project as a place-making anchor and the Des Moines Creek Business Park West. The forum was then briefed on the International Public Market Study results and next steps for interested cities by Port's Economic Development Manager Annie Tran and King County's Economic Development Director Ashton Allison. Updates from WashDOT, Sound Transit, and King County's Metro Link connections included reports on progress of both Stage 1 and the start of Stage 2 of the Puget Sound Gateway SR 509 extension project. Much of Stage 1 is nearing completion, Stage 2 has begun, and the entire project expected to be completed in 2028. Efforts to address safety concerns for riders, the siting of the Operations and Maintenance South Facility in Federal Way, and the Federal Way Link Extension Project. Community outreach efforts for helping to identify transit or other mobility concerns. Aviation Managing Director Lance Little reported out on the August 28th start, which included a presentation by the FAA on the noise policy review currently underway. START members also consider potential state policy priorities that may be pursued in 2025. An update on port cyber attack followed by SAMP near-term project and anticipated NEPA publication on October 21st were also provided. This concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erica Chung, for that report out. Are there any questions for Erica at this time, or any questions regarding committees? All right, thank you again, Erica. Moving us along, we are now at the public comment section of our agenda. The Port Commission welcomes public comments as an important part of the public process. Comments are received and considered by the Commission in its deliberations. Before we take public comments, let's review our rules for in-person and virtual public comment. Clerk Hart, please play the recording.
The Port of Seattle Commission welcomes you to our meeting today. As noted, public comment is an important part of the public process, and the Port of Seattle Commission thanks you for joining us. Before proceeding, we will overview the rules governing public comment for your general information. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak unless otherwise revised by the presiding officer for the purposes of meeting efficiency, and the speaker shall keep their remarks within the allotted time provided. A timer will appear on the screen, and a buzzer will sound at the end of the speaker's comment period. The Commission accepts comments on items appearing on its agenda and items related to the conduct of port business. The presiding officer will ask speakers to limit their comments to these topics. This rule applies to both introductory and concluding remarks. Disruptions of Commission public meetings are prohibited. General disruptions include, but are not limited to, the following: speaking before being recognized by the presiding officer, holding or placing banners and signs in the meeting room in a way that endangers others or obstructs the flow of people or view of others at the meeting, intentionally disrupting, disturbing, or otherwise impeding attendance or participation at a meeting, refusing to follow the direction of the presiding officer or security personnel, attempting to use the comment time for purposeful delay without conveying a discernible message, using the comment period to assist in the campaign for election of any person to any office or for the promotion of or opposition to any ballot proposition except when addressing action being taken by the Commission on a ballot proposition appearing on its agenda, directing public comments to the audience, engaging in abusive or harassing behavior, including but not limited to derogatory remarks based on age, race, color, national origin, ancestry, religion, disability, pregnancy, sex, gender, sexual orientation, transgender status, marital status, or any other category protected by law, the use of obscene or profane language and gestures, assaults or other threatening behavior, and sexual misconduct or sexual harassment. For safety purposes, individuals are asked not to physically approach commissioners or staff at the meeting table during the meeting. Individuals may provide written public comment before or after the meeting, and in addition, speakers may offer written materials to the commission clerk for distribution during their testimony to the commission. A detailed list of the public comment rules is available through the commission clerk. If a meeting is disrupted by an individual in attendance in the meeting room or by an individual providing public comment in person or virtually, the port will impose progressive consequences that may result in exclusion from future meetings. Written materials provided to the clerk will be included in today's meeting record. The clerk has a list of those prepared to speak. When your name is called, please come to the testimony table or unmute yourself if joining virtually. Repeat your name for the record and state your topic related to an item on the agenda or related to the conduct of port business. For those joining virtually, when you have concluded your remarks, please turn off your camera and mute your microphone. Our public comment period will now commence. Thank you again for joining us today.
Give me just a moment to get that timer up, Madam Commission President.
And I have the list of names.
You do. We are ready.
Thank you, Clerk Hart. I believe our first speaker is Berrien City Council member Sarah Moore. Sarah, are you with us? Are we having technical issues?
I
with
think
the
we
council
are. Let's go ahead and I know that Sarah is attempting to speak. It might be her speakers on her end. Let's go ahead and call another speaker and come back to her.
Okay. Councilwoman, we'll come back to you in just a minute. The next speaker I have on my list is Sandy Hunt. I believe also joining us virtually.
I am. Can you hear me?
I can, thank you. Please proceed.
Great, thank you. My name is Sandy Hunt, and I'm speaking as an individual on item number 10A. We're very excited to receive this last night in email and have had an opportunity just a little bit to look over. So that's why those of us who are defenders of Highline Forest, formerly North Sea-Tac Park, are speaking as individuals today. So I'm sure we'll have more comments in the future. We really appreciate all the effort, all the conversations. I mean, it's just countless hours that we know that you've put into making this happen. I only have 2 minutes, so I can't go on and on about it. But I do want to kind of pivot then to the people in the south end of the airport who have a related, though not exactly similar, issue with the Barnes Creek connector trail and the Des Moines Creek West Park. To them, it's been a park for the last few decades. Now they're going to lose 500 trees, and their trail space there is going to radically change. So we ask you to consider like the successes we've had with North Sea-Tac Park and look at how that can be a benefit to the communities surrounding the airport in all the different neighborhoods that are part of the Highline Forest. So thank you, and I'm sure we will be thanking you more formally when we get an opportunity.
Thank you so much for your comments.
That ends my comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandy, for those comments. Do we know if we have Councilwoman Moore with
I
us?
believe she is available.
Okay, great. Councilwoman Moore, you have 2 minutes. Please provide your comments and welcome.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Moore. I'm speaking about the substitute commission order sponsored by Commissioners Mohammed and Salomon that advances the port's work to permanently preserve North Sea-Tac Park for recreational and public park uses. I'd like to thank the commissioners for proposing this amendment and support its adoption. I'm a member of the Highline Sea-Tac Botanical Gardens Foundation's Board of Directors. I also serve on Burion's City Council and on its airport committee, and know many Burien residents who walk across the street into Sea-Tac to enjoy its park. But today I'm speaking to you as a private resident, a parent, a consumer of oxygen, and an unwitting consumer of many airborne pollutants associated with air transportation and the ground transport that comes with it. I live within a 10-minute walk of the park, and it was at one of its playgrounds 20 years ago that my son experienced his first life-threatening asthma attack, which I now know is more common for residents near the airport than it is in the rest of King County. So with that said, North Sea-Tac Park has many amenities, which I enjoy. It has playgrounds, sports fields, a BMX track, off-road bike tracks, a botanical garden, a wetland bog, paved trails, and many walking paths. But what I want to emphasize today in my comments is that the park is more than the sum of its parts. It's home to substantial tree canopy in part of King County that desperately needs trees. The conifer cover filters the pollutants produced by airplanes and cars and gives back oxygen. The trees mask some of the worst noise pollution and create cooling spots, which people visit on the hottest days of the summer. It is a system supporting noise, water, and air filtration, wildlife, and human recreation. People and wildlife can flow from one part of the park to the next, enjoying crowded playing fields or solitary walks. They can stumble upon new parts of the park that seem wild and then pop up in well-manicured gardens. The adjacency of low-use, unbuilt parts of the park is an enormous asset to people and to the system alike. And while not a wild space, it provides many of the benefits of one within the reach of a community with great need for such. I urge you to keep North Sea-Tac Park as intact as possible by conserving all spaces for public use. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Moore, for your comments. Moving us along, I have Rick Hardwood, who's joining us as well. Rick?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Hi. Hello, Commissioners. I'm Rick Harwood, speaking as an individual on new business item 10A. I'm a member of the Defenders of the Highline Forest, formerly known as Defenders of North Sea-Tac Park. I'm also a retired Highline School District High School principal, active member of Rotary Club of Sea-Tac Tukwila, and a volunteer working with asylum-seeking families at Riverton Park United Methodist Church. I want to express my appreciation and support for the proposed order of the Port Commission dealing with the future of North Sea-Tac Park. In all of my experiences working, recreating, and developing relationships in the Sea-Tac and Tukwila communities, I've seen a great concern and commitment by residents to the quality of life in their community, especially as they live, work, and play as neighbors of Sea-Tac Park, living under the flight path of aircraft that pass overhead every 3 minutes of their lives. The order is a step in the right direction of preserving a small but important part of the natural environment of the Highline community. I want to highlight a few statements in the order that I hope will continue to be the true intent of the Commission. The order states that the Port Commission sees North Sea-Tac Park as an important natural asset for the environment. The order directs the Port Executive Director to develop plans that meet with the requirements of the FAA Reauthorization Act, stating that the Executive Director should also consider supporting additional environmental restoration work in the park. The Port and the surrounding communities both acknowledge the essential importance of parks and open spaces as a key ingredient to provide clean air to protect against climate change. To be consistent with these statements, the Port Commission must truly commit not just to a park for recreational use, but to protection of and increased tree canopy, preservation of bogs and creeks, and a full commitment to no further development for airport-related commercial use. The SAMP and the real estate development plans need to be revised to be consistent with the intent of this order. I look forward to seeing where this order leads. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick, for your comments. The next person I have on the list is Barbara McMichael. Welcome.
Good Good afternoon. I'm Barbara McMichael from resident of Des Moines, members of Defenders of Highline Forest. I'm here today to observe item 10A about North Sea-Tac Park. First, I want to acknowledge, though, Noemi Maxwell, a former Boulevard Park resident and Boulevard Park librarian, who initiated the advocacy efforts that brought this to everybody's attention, the importance of North Sea-Tac Park. And the fact that that turned into Defenders of North Sea-Tac Park. And as a resident south of the airport, I joined and out of solidarity, and it has since become Defenders of Highline Forest, because all of our airport adjacent communities are impacted by loss of tree canopy. So tree canopy and trees, especially the native trees of Washington State, are essential to our identity and well-being. I think that's reflected in your regular land acknowledgement. And I also want to point out that the community that was really probably the precipitating force for this particular action, I hope you will continue to keep them in the loop. That means us at the Defenders of Highline Forest, but also the city of Sea-Tac. I just really think this has been a great example of everybody working together. When you mention recreation in your resolution, I think rightly it should be forest compatible recreation, just to make sure that trees don't get mowed down for for a pickleball court. And finally, I'm going to just suggest that this commission is pretty environmentally friendly. And more than a century has gone by, I think, since the initial port charter was written. And I would love to invite you, as our elected representatives, to re-examine what that charter says. Economic development is, our port is great at economic development, but we are facing climate change, and I think this is an opportunity for you to be the leaders in figuring out how we go forward with an truly environmentally sustainable approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara, for your comments. Appreciate it. Next on the list is Des Moines City Council Member J.C. Harris.
Hi there. I am here today to mention the SAMP public comment period opens on October the 21st. And I want to note that only one of you on the dais was present when basically the whole Megillah began. I mention that because we have a new incoming city manager. Sea-Tac is between city managers. None of the management in any of the cities has remained consistent. And there's been this 5-year pause, and the only continuity of knowledge essentially is with the port staff. The scoping process ended in 2019. It's been essentially 5 years in amber. And I also want to note that all of our, the port is doing fabulously, well done to you, but all the surrounding cities are having medium to heavy duty budget issues, and at the end of the year are intently focused on that. So with all the staff changes and the relentless focus on the budget, we are frankly unprepared. Oh, and did I mention this little cyber attack thing? Frankly, the SAMP is a regulatory, meaning a legal process. So anyone trying to get up to speed is having some also medium to heavy duty challenges. Good thing that a little group, ctacnoise.info, has archived all of that stuff. I would ask that the port consider delaying the close of the comment period until about the second week of January at a minimum. You have to give us a sporting chance to do the research necessary to provide subject matter experts and do something meaningful in this regulatory process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember J.C. Harris, for those comments. That concludes the signups that I have in front of me. Clerk Hart, would you be able to provide a synopsis of any written comments that we have at this time?
Yes, Madam Commission President, would you like to call from any additional comments from the room?
Yes, happy to. Is there anyone else present on the Teams call or present in the room today who did not sign up but wishes to provide comments and address the commission? If so, please proceed and come to the dais and provide your name and the item that you would like to speak on. Nobody wants to? Hearing no further comments from the public, at this time I'll ask Clerk Hart to please provide a synopsis of any written comments that we've received today. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Commission President, members of the Commission, and Executive Director Metric. We have not received any written comments prior to this meeting today. However, if we do receive any comments during the course of this meeting into tomorrow, we will make sure that they are included as part of the meeting record, and they will be distributed to you.
Thank you, Clerk Hart. Hearing no further public testimonies, we'll now move on to the consent agenda. Commissioners, items on the consent agenda are considered routine and will be adopted by one motion. Items removed from the consent agenda will be considered separately immediately after adoption of the remaining consent agenda items. At this time, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda covering items number 8A, 8B, 8C, and 8D. Is there a motion and a second for this?
So moved.
Seconded.
Great. The motion has been made and seconded. Commissioners, please say aye or nay when your names are called for approval of the agenda. Clerk Hart?
Thank you. Beginning with Commissioner Calkins.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Fellman.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Hasakawa.
Aye.
Thank you, and Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you. 4 ayes, 0 nays for this item.
The motion passes. Thank you. Moving us along. Point of information. Go ahead. Commissioner Hasakawa?
Thank you, President Mohammed. In light of Councilmember Harris's public comments, I just wanted to share that although we have a web page outage currently, we do have a temporary landing page that's up and running regarding the SAMP environmental review. So folks can visit sampntpenvironmentalreview.org. That's SAMP, N is in Nancy, TP environmentalreview.org for information. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hasagawa, and we'll make sure that that information is relayed and is shared with the public as well. Thank you. Moving us on in the agenda, we have one new business item. Clerk Hart, please read the item into the record, and then Executive Director Metric will introduce the item. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Agenda Item 10A, Order Number 2024-12, an order to prepare and submit documentation to the Federal Aviation Administration to designate North Sea-Tac Park for recreational uses as outlined in the 2024 Federal Aviation Administration Reauthorization Act.
Commissioners, I wanted to offer my support for this work outlined in this order and then the understanding the substitute as well. I want to recognize the efforts of our government relations staff, particularly our Senior Manager for Federal Government Relations, Eric Shinfield, for his work to support the FAA reauthorization language that makes this opportunity possible. We look forward to continuing this work regarding North Sea-Tac Park, working with you on this. So
I think Eric is virtual.
That is correct, Commissioner. Great. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Eric Shinfeld, Senior Manager of Federal Government Relations for the Port of Seattle. I'm sorry to not be with you today. I'm here at Pier 69 preparing to host an event with Representative Jayapal in a little bit, so pleased to be able to join you virtually here in Pierce Edwards' office. This order, as many commenters have already focused on, is to take a step in a process that we are really pleased did not exist about 6 months ago. We identified early on that one of the issues with permanently preserving North Sea-Tac Park for recreational and community use was the requirements of the Federal Aviation Administration and what we refer to as grant assurances that require certain uses of federally funded airport-owned land. We were able to work very closely with our congressional delegation, and I want to make sure that we give all credit to our congressional delegation, particularly U.S. Representative Adam Smith, U.S. Representative Pramila Jayapal, U.S. Representative Rick Larson, as well as U.S. Senator Maria Cantwell and U.S. Senator Patty Murray. They are the ones who shepherded this language throughout the very extensive FAA reauthorization process. That was a multi-year process, and we were really pleased that this past spring that piece of legislation did finally pass Congress, was signed into law by President Biden, and did include what is now known as Section 706, which is referred to as community use of airport land. And there's a lot of text in the FAA reauthorization in Section 706, but the core summary of what this piece of legislation says is, if there is a piece of land that meets certain criteria, owned by an airport federally funded, continues to be used as a park, leased to a nearby community, among a number of other items, then the airport can submit documentation to the FAA that says that this land does meet that criteria, and therefore this land can be permanently used for recreational and community use. And so what this order states, the order that was published in the meeting materials last week, states that the Commission directs the Executive Director and the Port staff to follow the process outlined in Section 706 of the FAA Reauthorization Bill to develop that documentation and then ultimately to submit that documentation. The order lays out what those criteria are. We can go into greater detail if that's of interest to the community. The process is pretty straightforward. And one thing that I think is particularly important about the way that the legislation was crafted is this is not documentation that we submit to the FAA for their consideration and approval. We do not need the FAA to approve this documentation, but we do need to do a really good job. We do need to make sure that we have crossed all of our T's, dotted all of our I's, done a really thorough and thoughtful job of filling out this documentation. Even though it can't be technically reversed or denied, we want to make sure that we really have done everything in the legislation so that we can feel very confident that we've satisfied the requirements of the legislation and can permanently preserve North Sea-Tac Park for recreational community uses. So I will stop there. Again, thank you, commissioners, for your direction to pursue this piece of legislation in the first place. Our deepest gratitude not only to our congressional delegation who shepherded this through the process, but all of the members of the community, particularly the city of Sea-Tac and others who helped us advocate for the inclusion of this language in the final legislation, and really pleased to be able to be here today to say that the legislation is passed, it is law, and we can now start to take advantage of it. And that concludes my remarks.
Great, thank you, Eric, for your the information that you provided. At this time, are there any questions specifically for Eric? Okay, thank you again. There is a substitution to this order, so I will just ask for Commissioner's grace as we work through this. I will first ask for a motion and a second to adopt order number 2014-12.
I'm sorry, that was me. It's 2024.
Yeah, I was like, is that?
Yeah, I'm going to blame it on my bad eyesight.
Okay, 2024-12. I was like, maybe it's a code for something else. All right, so if I can get a motion and a second to adopt order number 2024-12.
Seconded.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded. Commissioners, there is a substitute order before you today for your consideration. You have a copy of that substitute order in front of you, as well as a copy of the original proposed order distributed on Thursday. Commissioner Fellman and I sponsored the order, and we also provided the substitute amendments. So basically what we did is we amended our own order a couple of times, and I just jokingly said to Commissioner Fellman that he is not allowed to amend his amendments. So we're going to keep this order as is if there's no objections today. I would like to address the substitute amendment first, and then I'll turn it over to Commissioner Fellman for comments as well, and then I'll open it up to Commissioner our rest of our commissioners for comments. I just want to start.
Madam Commissioner President, can we get a motion on the floor to substitute by amendment?
Oh, okay, that's okay.
Yes.
So
Can I get an
moved.
order? Yep.
I move that we adopt the substitute measure for item, for a, actually, sorry about that, for item 10A, order number 2024/12, substitute.
Great. Can I get a second?
Seconded.
Great. Now open it up for discussions, correct, Clerk Hart? Beautiful. Okay. I just wanted to make a couple of comments since I'm supporting and sponsoring this order today. I think what is important to just mention is how did we get here? A lot of work has went into this, and for me, it's very clear how we got here. It has been through leadership, strong partnerships with our local community, strong partnerships with our congressional delegation, as well as us thinking outside of the box. It is not common for us to be able to see in the FAA reauthorization bill a specific park's name to go into that act. And it wasn't easy work, and I want to thank all of our commissioners, our current commissioners who've worked so hard on making North Sea-Tac Park a priority area, a priority issue for the commission, and that leadership is why we're here today. That is why we have had our staff members work really hard in ensuring that North Sea-Tac Park was part of the FAA reauthorization bill. As some of you may even remember, last year we did a DC trip with the local community members or the local cities around the airport, cities of Sea-Tac, Des Moines, Berrien. Their leadership joined us for a DC trip where we went and talked to a number of our delegation members and others from other parts of the country. And we talked to them about the importance of protecting green spaces, natural resources, and that conversation was very much action-oriented, and we did see real progress come out of that. North Sea-Tac Park was very much part of those discussions that we had. And I will just say, I am a resident of South King County. North Sea-Tac Park is a park that I go to, and I have heard from our community members how important having that park as a park is to them. And they've elevated that issue, and I want to thank them for their continued advocacy in reaching out to the commission to talk to us about the importance of it. I also just want to thank our congressional delegation, both our U.S. senators, Senator Cantwell and Murray, and their staff, who met with us and met with our port staff to ensure that this item was moving forward and was very much part of the FAA reauthorization bill. Achieving this was just no easy task, and so again, I just want to highlight the important role that our commission has played, our port staff has played, and it did take leadership from everyone to be able to be at where we're at today. And we did our due diligence. I know that there's people who wanted us to come in and get it done quickly, but we are a special purpose government, and it is important for us to partner with other jurisdictions, to partner with our state, federal government, to get things done, and that is never an easy task to do. And so I express just deep gratitude for those who made it happen. Eric Schimpfield, thank you so much. You led a lot of the conversation on behalf of the port and on behalf of the commission to have this item included in the FAA reauthorization bill. With that said, I want to be clear. We've said this from the beginning. It is critical for North Sea-Tac Park to be safeguarded, and it's as simple as that. That's what this order says, and it requests a timeline, and I'm looking forward to the future outcomes of this, and we'll continue to track it as a commission, and so I'm looking forward to supporting this item. Commissioner Feldman, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, President Mohammed, and for your leadership in bringing this forward today. I think the comments that we received today are sort of reflective of the fact that, it's a pretty big challenge being, representing all of King County. King County is a big place, and if it wasn't for the community's bringing to our attention certain things, the priorities that they feel are key to their quality of life, it would be pretty impossible to do the job. And it can't just be because we feel this way. The compelling arguments that the communities have made, the significance, the paucity of other green spaces in this area, the values that were expressed that, it's not just a playground, but it's an ecological resource. And I appreciate the point made, we don't want to expand the playgrounds at the cost of the ecological resources, but we are here to do both. The fact that there's this starting amount of money to actually do some of the ecological restoration work is an acknowledgement of what the other one of the other commenters made. So, but I just hope that that the community feels that they've been heard. That we obviously have to balance these various different economic needs of of the growing airport with those of the needs of the community. This was not an easy no-brainer. And so we've heard from a lot of different sides to come up to this decision, and I really appreciate from my colleagues the strong support for moving forward this. But just to reiterate, this stuff doesn't happen without the real talent pool that we have within the organization and the leadership we have in our representatives at the state and federal level. So thank you, Eric. Thank you, Port staff. And obviously, we have an incredible delegation with the likes of Cantwell and Murray just being, some of the most powerful members of Congress, Adam Smith being the representative for the area, and with Rick Larson both on the committees. This has been a tour de force that really couldn't have happened both at the external and internal level. So thank you all for your efforts, and I hope we can complete this job soon. That was the only other thing, is putting dates on this decision-making. We've been jawboning a long time, and so there are now decision points that I think we can look forward to resolving. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fellman, for those comments. Commissioner Hasagawa.
Briefly, just want to acknowledge that it has been a very, very long saga, and to come to this juncture has taken many, many hands. And so I'd like to acknowledge and express my gratitude to everyone who's brought it to this juncture, beginning with the community members who cited this as an urgent priority, and doing the stakeholdering to make sure that there's education among the Port of Seattle, among the cities, among the residents, who all have, I think, grown a deep appreciation and come to a shared vision of what the highest use of North Sea-Tac Park is. And we know that that is for community benefit in all of the ways that that can be described. I would like to acknowledge the work of the Joint Advisory Committee, the role of the Port of Seattle staff, the City of Sea-Tac staff, the City of Sea-Tac council members, and my colleague commissioners. I served on that my first year upon the commission, and since then, Commissioners Fellman and Mohammed have demonstrated tireless leadership on this issue. I'd like to thank you for bringing forward an order, something tangible that all of us, and not least of which the members of the public, can come and behold. Thank you for making sure that our colleagues over at the city had awareness around it, and it is a wonderful good faith testament and something tangible. We have been saying to the public over and over again, there are no plans to develop a North Sea-Tac Park. That's not what is in the vision and the priority for the commission or for the Port of Seattle. And so now you have it here. And I'd like to thank you for specifically calling out timelines. And I think that that's truly also a really important element. So deep gratitude to everyone who's helped bring it to this juncture.
Thank you, Commissioner Hasagawa. Commissioner Calkins?
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much for all the work that colleagues and staff have done on this. For me, this was a hard decision going back to the earliest conversations we had about this, because I entered into the conversation thinking from a sort of traditional accounting model. Here we have this economic asset adjacent to our airport that is already space constrained, and we're going to forever make it unusable for anything other than its current use. That sounded like we were just giving something away. But as we all listened to community members, we had conversations with the elected leaders in Sea-Tac, it was clear to me that we were not doing a full cost accounting. of what this park represented, that instead we needed to think about an environmental and social and human values full cost accounting. You know, what are the opportunity costs of developing this into something else? What are the hidden costs and externalities associated with commercial or industrial development in that space? And pretty soon you start to see that the balance tips towards this is a real win for everyone involved. And in particular, I think we are making the space more human and more resilient and more, as we've heard today in public comment, just a better place to raise a family and live. I also, and so I'm fully supportive. I also, as we've done all these studies on that parcel of land, it really is, there's a term I learned in college that has stuck with me through the years. The term is palimpsest, which I'm going to read the actual definition, which is something reused or altered but still bearing visible traces of its earlier form. And as we went through layer upon layer of the history of this plot of land, from time immemorial to a small residential community that predated, I think, the airport, to then needing that residential community needing to be displaced because of the growth of the airport, and then it reverting to now a natural space again. There's something really beautiful about that, and I think there's a book there to be written if somebody wants to take that up. But sorry for my rant about this, but I really think it's just a lovely arc of thoughtful decision-making and community advocacy, and I'm proud to support it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, Commissioner Fellman.
I believe that it's important to acknowledge the fact that the city of Sea-Tac was key in, and my colleague Peter Kwan was, he's like the only other person that's been as old as me, and then also, but Noemi Maxwell, Sea-Tac was being responsive to their constituents, and I really appreciate you bringing her up, and I think she's back in New York or something by now. But anyway, these are individuals that are really key to making these things possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fellman. Yeah, I also wanted to thank the Sea-Tac City Council members, and I have served on the Joint Advisory Committee with Sea-Tac since I've joined the commission, so at least 3 years. And it's not easy. It's tough work that we do in that committee, but just really appreciate the conversations that we've had in JAC and their advocacy as well. So I will move us forward. Clerk Hart, I will move the amendment forward, and you'll call the roll for the vote. And commissioners, please say aye or nay when your names are called. The motion is on the floor.
Correct. This is a vote on the primary amendment before you by substitute, beginning with Commissioner Calkins.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Fellman.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Hasakawa.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you. 4 ayes, 0 nays.
The amendment passes. Thank you all.
That was
The primary amendment, yeah, that was the first one. So the second one.
The primary.
I told you guys I was going to take a minute to get through this, so it's taken a minute to get through it. So commissioners, is there any further discussions or debate on the main motion as amended by substitute? Hearing no additional discussions, Clerk Hart, please call the roll for the vote on the main motion as amended. Commissioners, please say aye or nay when your names are called.
Thank you. Beginning with Commissioner Fellman.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Calkins.
Aye.
Thank you, and Commissioner Hasakawa.
Aye.
Thank you. 4 ayes, 0 nays for this item.
Great. Now officially the motion passes. Thank you. All right, moving us along, we are now at presentations and staff reports. Clerk Hart, please read the next item into the record, and then Executive Director Metric will introduce the item.
Thank you. This is Agenda Item 11A, the South King County Community Impact Fund Program Briefing.
Commissioners, since this fund was initiated nearly 4 years ago, the Port has invested in a total of 84 projects with 52 community partners with a value of over $9 million. These projects span economic recovery, environmental, would-be businesses, capacity building, and more. Over the same period, we engaged in extensive community outreach and delivered several process improvements to enhance the program. Today, we will brief you on our proposal to invest $14 million for the next iteration of this program. We will seek your adoption of this proposal at the next commission meeting. The presenters this afternoon are the Senior Director of Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, Bukta Kesar, and the Senior Manager for Community Engagement, External Relations, AJ McClure. So, Bukta.
Thank you, Executive Director Metric. Thank you, Commissioners. Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Bukta Kesar, Senior Director of Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion.
AJ McClure, Senior Manager, External Relations, Community Engagement.
We're here to offer you an update about what we call now the first chapter of South King County Fund, 5 years into the program, which was originally created in November of 2018 with a motion from our commission with full support from everyone that dedicated $10 million over 5 years in airport communities. Next slide, please. We plan to give you an overview of our spending, talk to you about some outcomes that we've partnered with community attributes to be able to define and present to you here today, proposed improvement, and some next steps. Next slide, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you again for the opportunity to present President Mohammed, Commissioners, Executive Director Metric. So we just wanted to revisit the mission and the vision of this as we contemplate the next iteration of the fund, looking back on what we've achieved over the first 5 years. Our mission and vision has not changed. It's a result of years of community engagement, years of receiving feedback, and our commitment remains the same in terms of focused on equity, focused on being community-driven, and removing barriers for communities that have historically been under-resourced within our near-airport communities, and continuing to use equity as driving our decision-making and how we administer and manage this program. And this is something that has been reinforced over the years as well through those core principles, through the feedback we've gotten from community partners and continue to receive from our community partners. Next slide, please.
Before I talk about this, I apologize. I did not mention that South King County Fund has 2 executive sponsors, myself and Pierce Edwards. Pierce is so important. I just forgot to mention him. He's been really busy since the cyber attack, and so he has not been really engaged in what we bring to you today. But of course, he and I work very closely every step of the way over the last 5 years.
I think he's also having to protect his cookie jar back at the office where Eric Schinfeld is sitting.
Yes, Eric is currently in his office. That's right.
He appears.
Always busy. You can see on this slide a summary of our investments in the community over the last 5 years. Economic recovery was a title that, of course, shortly after South King County Fund was launched, COVID happened. And we really made a pivot and called this economic recovery, looking at the impact that COVID had in communities in South King County. So, for example, within 2 months after COVID, we knew through the use of our own equity index that unemployment rates in South King County were as high as 40%. And we were really focusing on actually what is the really important niche for Port of Seattle, which is workforce development, job creation, training programs, and we were able to really use economic recovery to respond. We started with single year grants of just $60,000 a year, but we heard from community very quickly that, of course, the work of workforce development needed a more longer term commitment, and that the kind of results we wanted to see, we should really focus on a multi-year grants. And so we made that change when we now have 3-year multi-year contracts of up to $250,000 each. Environmental programs, the same. We started with $20,000 a year, and we also pivoted to add multi-year for up to $60K. This program still requires a match by state RCW. Of course, at first it was 3-1, but through the efforts of Pierce Edwards and his government relations team, we've been able to go to 2-1 match, which is a huge win for our communities. We also pivoted to add WIMBY support because we saw that after COVID, the impact in small businesses and WIMBY businesses was so great that we worked with Director Mian Rice through diversity in contracting to invest in WIMBY businesses in South King County, not direct funding to businesses, but through Highline business program to invest in capacity building of businesses. Next slide, please. So the total of our investments in 52 different organizations over 84 projects are $9.2 million. You can see the breakdown of our investments here on this slide. I think it's important to note that the 3 programs, in addition, we contracted with a company called Ciliana Consulting that has a lot of relationships in South King County. When we launched South King County Fund, the port had very few community partnerships. So Ciliana and contracting with a company like Ciliana was really key for us in earning the trust of organizations, meeting a lot of new organizations, bringing them to the table and understanding their needs. So Ciliana started from just a range of hiring community liaisons in languages and in communities who've been able to bring them to the table, bring them to info sessions, to really supporting them in understanding port-related industries. Next slide, please. So I'm sorry about the very small print, but this is the 26 organizations and 34 projects that we funded through economic recovery, of course, all focused on workforce development and aviation, maritime, green jobs, and construction tracks. What I think is really important to note about these organizations is that they're often very new to port-related industries. So they're different than the organizations that we typically contract with in our workforce development department. These organizations sometimes have a lot of workforce experience, but no experience or relationships, for example, in maritime or aviation, and they're just getting up and running in that sector. Next slide, please. Again, this is very small print, but Commissioner Mohammed, you brought up this question, of course, about like how many job placements and how many people are we supporting. I think it is important to note that since so many of the organizations are new to aviation, maritime, construction jobs, it is not cheap to do this work, but also organizations like us have had to face increase in cost of living, cost of operating the organizations, their rent, their staffing. And so you can see at the bottom line, I don't know if you can actually see that, but the cost of placement and retention, as well as like programming per individual. We're working with community attributes to look at these results, and actually Chris Mefford, I see, is online in case you have any questions. I feel like it's important to treat these numbers as a baseline moving forward, because we don't really know. We've done a lot of research to look around the country, in our state, in King County. Is this too expensive? Is this the right price? It is hard to say, to be honest. And so for us, I think we can look at this as a baseline for programs moving forward. Next slide, please.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the outcomes for our environmental program. And just to remind commissioners, the program is slightly different in terms of its restrictions in regards to the economic recovery program. We have dollar limits up to $20,000 per year, $60,000 over a 3-year term. But similar to the economic program, we are focusing on engaging organizations and communities that have historically not been partnering with the port. And so over the first 4 years, we've had 44 projects contracted in the first 4 cycles, which represent 32 different organizations. And a lot of these organizations, particularly the 47% of the BIPOC-led organizations, are brand new working with the port. So in terms of achieving our mission around increasing access and building community partnerships, it's definitely been a win-win there. And I'll also say, beyond these numbers, the impact of the environmental program within these communities goes well beyond the numbers in terms of just being able to expose communities to land stewardship principles, environmental sustainability education that did not exist prior to this. So this is something where we have heard continually that this funding, if not was accessible or available to these organizations, communities, and we're talking multi-generational communities, cultural communities, would not have been exposed to this type of education and topic. And so if you look at the volunteer hours logged and the education hours logged, you can just get a sense of the breadth that this program has been reaching among the communities in South King County. Next slide, please. As Bukta mentioned earlier in the summary, a part of the program, the third pillar of the program, is around small business support, and this was particularly focused on BIPOC WIMBY programs or WIMBY businesses that are impacted by COVID-19. Working closely with our team in economic development, particularly me and Rice's team on diversity and contracting, these programs support a wide variety of businesses that are looking to engage the port in a variety of ways. It furthers our partnership with the South Sound Alliance with the cities of Sea-Tac, Tukwila, Normandy Park, Des Moines, and Burien, and maintains our partnership with Highline College through the Small Business Development Center. And I think Mian's here in case there's any particular questions that folks have. Next slide, please. So we've talked about community a lot in our short presentation here, and you'll continue to hear it more as we continue with our slides here. But authentic community engagement is a core function of this program. It's really what drives it, and it drives everything that we do. We've shared, it's helped achieve our vision through key ways, ensuring leadership opportunities, which I think is fundamental to the community capacity building that, again, we've invested so much in. The two main ways we've been able to do that is through our community reviewers and our community liaisons. Our community liaisons, which is supported by the Ciliana contract, recruits, trains, supports people from the community that work with the organizations in South King County to learn more about the program, ask questions about the program, understand how they can apply, what projects could fit or not fit, and then connect them with our application and RFP process. The community reviewers is something that we've worked with, and we've actually been able to expand in the last couple cycles, where when we go out for RFP, we get a collection of applications that come in. We had community reviewers sit on those panels to review and give feedback in terms of what projects responded to the guidelines in the RFP and give their feedback. We have since in the last two cycles been able to incorporate community reviewers all the way through the decision-making process. So they're sitting down with port staff, evaluating, scoring, giving feedback, and ultimately helping in the decision-making and deciding which proposals move forward. So it's been hugely invaluable. It's been going a long way to opening that door of trust and increasing partnerships, increasing transparency in how we work with community. And I will also add both the liaisons and the community reviewers are compensated for their time, as particularly investing a lot of time in the community takes many hours. Next slide, please. So throughout the first 4 or 5 years, we've continually received feedback from one-on-one engagements through our contract management to the community sessions we've had, the learning sessions, the info sessions. And as such, we've been able to, we've been successful in responding to a lot of the feedback that we've received. We covered a couple of these in a previous slide, but multi-year funding was a huge component in terms of feedback that we received in the first couple cycles of the program, particularly with working with community organizations that have, whether they're volunteer run or very limited staff, they need to be adaptive. They need to adapt to changing conditions on the ground. And so having multi-year funding allowed for that. And that helped not only reduce some barriers, but it also allowed for better projects to come to fruition. The match requirement was another big one, and honestly, it continues to be. A 3-to-1 match is a huge lift. 2-to-1 better, but still a barrier. And I know that there's still conversations on how we could potentially address that in the future. But just going from 3-to-1 to 2-to-1 demonstrated our ability as a port to be able to adapt to community needs and respond in a way where we are really following through on reducing barriers for community. And then I talked about the community reviewer model and something that we've been able to replicate in other ways as well. And that goes a long way with, again, building trust and building community partnership and allowing the opportunity for us, the port, to engage with our community partners in other ways outside of the South County Fund. As I mentioned yesterday in our briefing, Commissioner Hasagawa, our ability to build relationships with organizations in South King County through the fund allowed us to engage those folks, those organizations, when the commission was approving the land stewardship plan earlier this year. We were able to go to those organizations, raise awareness around that plan, educate them, get feedback, and then ultimately they mobilized themselves to come out and voice support for the plan when it came to commission. Next slide, please. So moving forward, as we're getting into the second half of this presentation, we are looking to have another go at it, the next chapter of South County Fund. And although we've made some changes, there's still plenty of work to be done. And we've looked at we've got the feedback from our community, and we continue to get the feedback from community. We've done a lot of internal work looking at how we can make some of these changes. Moving forward, we bucketed our improvements and looking at some of the changes in 3 different buckets. Increasing program accessibility, expanding investments, and continue to building our community relationships. One of the refinements that we were looking at in terms of improving access will make it easier for communities to participate. So looking at info sessions and information sessions and RFP sessions, doing one-on-one technical assistance prior to the RFP opening, doing first-time applicant workshops is going to be a big help increase the level of participation in the fund moving forward. Simplifying the contract process is something we're continuing to look at. We're working with our folks in CPO constantly to think about how we're going to be doing that through the RFP process. Expanding our geographic area is something that we're proposing, we're looking at. Using the Port Equity Index to really drive where those investments are going to be made. Many communities are experiencing inequity beyond the original 6 communities that we've been investing in. We know that, and we think that the impact can be maximized in other jurisdictions. And so that's something that we're really looking forward to discussing further. And then deepening, doubling down on our partnerships, right? We've seen the benefit both in the community and with our relationships within the port to build those community relationships to deepen that trust. And I think the other part of this too is when we talk about community capacity building, again, which is a huge component of our program, on the environmental project side, it's really amazing to see when you talk to the organizations and you meet some of their volunteers and you see the look in their eyes when they're talking about the project or the park restoration that they just completed. And that's the community ownership that we're really, I think, trying to strive for. Because they see themselves in that space, they see that's an amenity in their neighborhood that they can take part in, and so that's another impact and benefit going beyond just the numbers. Next slide, please.
I'm sorry, if I could just make a point about the last slide, just for a moment, is that we're, for the economic recovery program, which is about 70% of the investments, we ask organizations, just so you know, to give a monthly report. We also ask for a half-year report. We also ask for an annual report. In some ways, this is a lot, but we are learning how to meet the needs of the port, of course, as well as the communities that we're working with, and more about, because in the beginning we faced issues, or for example, as for organizations that we were onboarding, 4 months, 5 months in, they would say they haven't been able to meet any employers in the maritime sector or aviation sector. So we're trying to stay on top of that, but I think we're asking for too much. But we're doing a lot of going back and forth and trying to find the right balance for all of us. And if we're reporting, and we're continuing along with our workforce development team, thinking about how to improve our systems, look at results, really look for the kind of change that we want to see in the community, support them, bring employers to the table, but also ask for the right number of monthly reports. Next slide, please. All right, so we are here today to brief you, but to ask also propose funding for $14 million for the next chapter, or the 2.0, as we're calling it, for South King County Fund. I believe we're on the agenda of the commission 2 weeks from today to come back again and to ask for your vote for the $14 million to be able to authorize. Now, I'm going to talk to you about some of the details of the changes that we want to make, and we haven't exactly figured out all of those details, but that's because our central procurement office, our legal team, I think we want this as a first step, to have your blessing to move forward with developing the new RFPs, the timeline, and figuring out some of the details. So in the next chapter of the fund, of course, as AJ said, we want to expand the region. We see less and less applications from the 6 cities, and we see a need for the bigger area of South King County to be in relationship with us. We know that already workers from Sea-Tac live in cities around, further out than just the 6 cities, but also people who live in the 6 cities, Community Attributes has been able to track for us, really travel further out and live in a larger region of South King County. And we want to continue to prioritize the 6 cities and our relationship with them, of course, and the organizations who are at the table with us already, but to bring more diverse communities to the table. We want to continue to invest in environmental programs and WIMBYs as we have been, but redesign the economic recovery program, because as I mentioned, that was a pivot that we made as a result of COVID, and we now feel like focusing on workforce development, economic opportunities is the next chapter of South King County Fund. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about the index here, and not being a person of, with a data or science background, I asked Chris Mefford to be online in case I mess up hugely, and he could help to answer any questions that you have. On this slide, the orange line that you see in King County is the 6 cities that we are already funding, or we're now calling the priority region. The purple line is what is the lowest equity scores in King County, or the, as we might say, the opposite, the highest levels of disparities in King County. So we would like to distinguish between the two and call the purple area eligible region and priority region. And you can see a list of, actually those are not all the same, because some are unincorporated regions of South King County, and some are cities, and some are areas of cities. So the purple region, we're still working our process of how would we figure out what priority means in the application process, what eligible means, how do we distinguish in South Seattle, of course, because the city of Seattle has areas that have very, very high levels of equity or low disparities. But there are the South End, for example, as we partner a lot in the Duwamish, South Park, Georgetown, we see a tremendous need for our dollars and investments. Next slide, please. I know that you're probably really familiar with the equity index, and you know that the index uses the 4 main categories of economy, livability, accessibility, and environment. Within each of those 4 categories, there are multiple indicators. So we have a total of 21 indicators. Just examples of the economy indicators are poverty rate, unemployment rate, household income. Examples of indicators in livability is home ownership, housing cost burden, life expectancy, crime risk, jobs within 30 minutes by transit. And then in accessibility, we have internet access, voter participation, bike access, pedestrian access, and in environment, some of the indicators that you see on this slide. I name all of that because this slide primarily shows environmental indicators, and it might make you think, oh, well, why are we not looking at the others? This is just a sampling of some of the indicators that shows the low equity scores. And you can see again that we're just really wanting to highlight how low the equity score is in a very large region of South King County. Next slide, please. All right, so in South Seattle, I think we can really quickly go over this, that there are a number of zip codes that are low equity score, but we're still figuring out the details of how the funding process can work. But again, in the Duwamish, South Park, and Georgetown is where we see the greatest needs. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the reason that I wanted to share this with you is because our process improvement team, our procurement, and our legal teams have been working really hard to figure out how do we create a process that is a better match for community organizations' partnership with us. We are in partnership with organizations that have workforce experience but know very little about port-related industry. So we're basically creating 3 different tracks for organizations that have little relationships with port-related industries, and then medium and high, and really kind of designing a model to be able to ask for mentoring, support, and capacity building for Tier A from organizations that have a lot of experience to be able to match with each other. Next slide, please.
So in terms of next steps, we're here today to present this information to you all and give you a sense of where we're hoping to go in the next iteration of the South County Fund. As previously mentioned, we're hoping to come back in 2 weeks on October 22nd for approval of the reauthorization. And then the work will get started in terms of engaging communities on this new refined direction for the program. Into the end of the year and into next year as we prepare for the first RFP for the Economic Recovery Program in March of 2025, and then a second RFP for the economic program for the, as Bupta mentioned, the various cycles or various tiers in July of 2025, and then resuming our environmental program RFP in September of next year, which is a regularly scheduled RFP in the last 4 cycles. And I think that concludes our presentation, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for this important work that you all are doing. I will open it up for questions from my colleagues, but just from a processing standpoint and the timeline quickly, is this going to come, when is this coming back to Commission? And is it going to come back as a first reading and then we vote on it, or?
Yes. Is that what it's called,
If I
first
can,
reading, and then you vote on it?
To the Commission President, actually it is on the agenda for 1022 for approval. So this is a briefing, and then a request for the approval for the authorization will be at the meeting on 1022.
Okay.
So there will not be a resolution, if that's what you're asking.
That is
There's
what I'm
no
asking,
first
but
or
there's
second
gonna be
reading.
like a resolution where it's introduced and then we consider that and then move on to like a second reading.
I believe it will come forward in the form of an action memorandum.
Okay. That's good for us to know and to consider in the meantime. Commissioners, any questions? No. Go back.
Thanks so much, and I appreciate the briefing, so I'm familiar with all the great work that you've done here. The only thing I'm trying to foresee the communities that were originally limited to beneficiaries of the fund, like the folks at the Highline Forum or START Committee, that, they feel they have ownership of the district, shall we say. And the name, if retaining the name and extending this far north, I could see as being problematic. But this is really, more of like becomes an equity fund, a workforce equity fund, environmental workforce equity fund. But to call it South King County at this point, I think could be seen as unnecessarily antagonistic to communities that feel that this was only for them. But the increase in the budget, I think, it should allay the concern about the funding, but it's technically no longer true. So I don't know what, and again, I don't particularly care, although I do like it to be geographically accurate, but do you see potential concern with the name being retained as it is?
Yeah, thank you for your question. First, it is really important for us to continue to prioritize the 6 cities. What that means, as I mentioned, we're still trying to figure out, is it an additional 2 points in their application process or a certain amount of money set aside for their applications? We're still trying to figure out those details. But I guess for me, when I first looked at the purple line all the way to Beacon Hill, Georgetown, South Park, I didn't feel that South King County is a conflict in looking at that picture. But of course, we're open to looking at that and coming back with another idea of King County Equity Fund, possibly.
But, it doesn't end at Soto. It's going up to Inner Bay.
Yes. In Interbay, thank you for your comment yesterday. Chris Mefford and I looked at the data. Of course, there's a few clusters in Interbay and Ballard of multi-housing close to the railroad tracks where we saw higher environmental impact and lower equity scores, but not as a whole. So that is some of the details that I think we need to figure out to, again, be able to, I think, look at more concentrated and focused low equity areas.
And just last thing, your equity mapping, it's at least like 5 parameters that overall come up with the number for equitable or inequitable zip codes, right? But as we spoke of before, certain zip codes are being driven more by one variable than the other. And so when you get an application for something what the problem is environmental, but they're asking to do something else. I mean, the mismatch sometimes. I think it can be very informative when we look at places that may be to the north.
Yes.
To explain what was the driving factor for that inequity, right? And so, and I think in terms of for the reviewers of the grants,
yes.
Right? I mean, this is an important parameter to evaluate how responsive it is to the reason for that score.
Thank you for that. And Chris, please correct me if I'm wrong, but on the equity index, you can actually only look by the economy filter or accessibility or environment. So we could separate out the indicators. Is that correct, Chris?
Hi, thank you. Happy to chime in here. Now, there's 30 some odd indicators in total that are grouped into the 5 categories, and each of the 5 categories have their own sub-index, is what we're talking about. But you can, with some confidence, click through to the block group level, actually, which are much smaller than the zip codes, and you get a sense for which of those 30 some odd indicators are the ones that are driving the overall index value. So there is a fair amount of transparency and sophistication with the individual indicators you can drill through to understand what's happening.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know if my mic was on. Chris, if you can introduce yourself for the record, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, of course, happy to do so. My name is Chris Mefford. I am president and CEO of Community Attributes, Inc., a Seattle-based company. Happy to serve the board.
Great, thank you. Go for it.
So I was really, I know we have had challenges in expending the environmental money, even though it's like the smallest part of money, because it was previously the 3-to-1 match. But I was really delighted to see that there was 27 parks restored and this work on green jobs. And I was, as we discussed before, you know, the environmental programs not only have that $20,000 a year RCW limit, which I would love to understand why that exists, but there's also that it has to have a partnership with the city government. Is that also the constraint?
No, that's a good question. It doesn't necessarily require it, but because the limitation or the restriction that these projects have to be done in public spaces, typically within these 6 communities, they are city parks or public spaces or school districts, right? That's another option as well. And so the more successful projects from the outset are usually in some sort of formal partnership with a city jurisdiction. So that's one of the things that we're hoping to look at in this next iteration, is not necessarily saying it's a requirement. We haven't gotten that far yet, but it's something like, so for instance, in cycle 4, we funded 6 projects, and through our evaluation process of the proposals, we made a concerted effort to make sure that there was a lot of communication or some sort of agreement within with the organization and the city in which they were wanting to work, so that it can increases the probability of it being a successful project.
And I would think also increasing the probability you get a match. I think it's really a very constructive thing, and the fact that parks there are broad constituencies between different parks, so you're feeding many birds with one seed, as it were.
Right.
Thank you.
That's very G.
That's the Audubon Society.
Thank you, Commissioner Fellman. Commissioner Hasegawa.
Sure. Okay, I wanted to follow up on Commissioner Fellman's line of questioning. So, but first, I wanted to thank you for bringing this item forward. Thank you to Director Gazar as well as Director Edwards, who are co-executive sponsors of this body of work, which has been ongoing for well over a year now with commission input. I'm glad to see how far this has progressed. Over a year ago, we were discussing about whether or not there should be actually parsed into 2 separate funds. Can you talk about the decision to keep it under one fund and the mechanism, and touch on the funding source as well?
Yes. I'm sorry, you're asking.
We can invite Director Edwards up as well, because he's just sitting in the audience. I'll watch you
Now I'm just going to sit up here.
perform in the hot seat
You're doing a great job.
You are co-sponsors of this, and so so welcome, Director Edwards. The question is we had considered potentially actually doing 2 separate funds if it was going to expand outside of the 6 proper cities. Can you talk about the rationale as to why it's all housed under one fund, and discuss the funding mechanism and how that works for us?
Sure, I'll take a stab at that. First of all, Pierce Edwards, Senior Director of External Relations, and as you noted, Executive Co-Sponsor of the South King County Impact Fund. Yeah, that's a good question. We did look at whether or not we should separate the funds into two. We also looked at, do we rebrand the entire fund name itself? So it would cause, or would, to Commissioner Fellman's point, remove any confusion or point to a new direction that the fund is going in. Another good reason is it's no longer economic recovery, for example. So those conversations are not off the table. We just were not able to resolve them in a timely manner. I think that certainly not in the next 2 weeks before we come back for consideration for approval, but certainly can come back to you with, I think the rebranding conversation is still alive and kicking, that we can come back before we ever would execute an RFP with a potentially a new name. I don't know about necessarily separating the two funds necessarily, but there might be a way to brand it under one umbrella is what we've been thinking about.
I would just add that with a lot of love and care for everyone who works at the port, I would say that our procurement process was never designed for nonprofits. Right. And so doing the one track is so challenging, as you've heard from nonprofits. And this is not the fault of the port or our procurement team who've worked so hard to find the right alignment. And yet, we have a picture where nonprofits and our legal or procurement or EDI, external relations team, negotiate back and forth for months to agree on the right contract. And so after a lot of negotiations back and forth about should we have two different funds, it just seemed like what we have is not even manageable.
I think we can all appreciate that. There was also discussion of the source of the funding was the ACES fund also as being a core component.
Yeah, it comes out of the history. The history of this program was, it's as Commissioner Fellman will know for being here, was the Airport Community Ecology Fund. Was a smaller grant that we started, that we actually worked with Forterra to do a large bulk of the work before it morphed into its current program, the South King County Community Impact or Investment Fund. The source of the funding is through the levy.
Very good. And I just want to highlight what Director Gazar just said. I think it is important to note that historically the Port of Seattle as a special government and a port authority has been largely a regulatory agency. It is not a pass-through agency. This is a very, very unique thing that the Port of Seattle has been able to create. I would like to take a moment of personal privilege to acknowledge my predecessor, Peter Steinbrook, who originally championed this fund in conjunction and input with South King County leadership at the time. This fund has functionally always worked as a way to put money in the hands of communities who have self-identified priorities for community improvement in priority areas, economic development, environmental resiliency, community empowerment, and I think earmarking funds year by year to expand this program has been one of the best and most effective ways to directly empower community members with urgent needs and growing needs as we develop and expand as a community, as a society, as a population. This does mark a significant expansion of this program. I think it is very critical to note that even if you're seeing the geographic boundary expand to the north, it is also expanding to the south to include more of South King County as well. I think of the tours that I took through Federal Way, where they want me to see firsthand of the impact of the flights coming directly over their elementary schools, and them looking for solutions to being able to address some of the impacts on their children, on their communities. So there's continued and expanded benefit to South King County, not just in jurisdiction, but in funds. So this 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 proposal does not compromise not a single dollar of funding towards the top 6 cities. So we need to acknowledge that. This is not a redirect. This is an expansion of a program. I would like to also acknowledge we are a regional entity that serves over 2 million constituents countywide. So the fact that we are finding a mechanism, through the mechanism that is tried and true and works, we do not need to reinvent that wheel through a second program. We can expand it. Whether we want to pay attention to semantics and rebrand with a title, I think that's okay, but if that's what it takes for my colleagues to feel comfortable. But I also don't want to signal that in any way, shape, or form are we getting it twisted about where the priority is with the priority 6 cities who do bear the brunt of the impact of port operations. So I want to applaud staff for looking for opportunities to maximize the input into community empowerment through dollars. I mean, that's just such an important and unique thing. It's a new thing that we're doing. We heard it in public comment today, imploring us to look for ways to reassess our charter. We're looking for these opportunities, not just for economic development, but for community benefits in many ways. And so I do express my wholehearted support for this proposal from staff. I'd like to thank you for the iterative and ongoing process in conjunction with my colleagues and I look forward to voting in support of it when it comes before us in a couple weeks.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Hasegawa, for your comments. Any additional comments from my colleagues at this time? I also echo those same sentiments and do support the South King County Fund program as a whole and have since I joined the commission. That said, I do think that there's areas for improvement and opportunities for us to consider things like rebranding. I have talked to staff about the importance of even curriculum development, right? A lot of the organizations that are on the list that have been funded are grassroots organizations, new organizations, and partnering with the port. And we want to make sure that we're setting up our nonprofit organizations for success and ensuring that they have the tools that they need to really be able to make the impact that is part of their vision and mission for these types of programs. And so I think it is our responsibility to provide that support, and how that is incorporated into the program is, I'll look to you all to provide that. And then the other thing that I want to also point to is just ensuring accountability and transparency, making sure that these organizations are also well informed about the compliance process for the Port of Seattle. Like you said, Director Gazar, the port historically has not partnered with nonprofit organizations, and the procurement process is challenging. So when it does come to compliance and processes, we need to be really thoughtful and intentional about how we're making sure that they're well informed in managing these public dollars. And so ensuring that we're all being good stewards of public funds is going to be really important process. And I think that there's opportunities in the phase 2 of this program. But yeah, I'm very supportive of it. I look forward to the changes, the consideration for rebranding. It's good to hear that there's still a lot of conversation that is to be had around what it will look like when it does come to us. And so I want to be very much part of those conversations and provide support or guidance where I can. Yeah, those are just my comments. And you all have heard this in private before. If there's no additional questions, Commissioner Hasegawa.
I just wanted to applaud you for your application of the Equity Index as a tool. I just think that that's so exciting. And we have invested lots of time and care and intentionality to developing that tool. And thank you to our guests who are with us online, but having a evidence-based justification for where we are investing our levy dollars, I think is really really important. So thank you so much for the application of that scientific tool.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Hasegawa, for those additional comments. Hearing no further comments from my colleagues, I will move us along in the agenda. Again, thank you all to the presenters. Appreciate you. All right. Clerk Hart, please read the next item into the record, and then Executive Director Metric will introduce the item for us. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Agenda Item 11B, Economic Development Division Operating Budget Briefing.
Commissioners, earlier today you heard our proposed aviation and maritime operating and capital budgets. This afternoon we'll delve into the details on another major line of business, economic development. This is a small but mighty team, and it's responsible for our diversity and contracting efforts, tourism, real estate development and planning, and economic development and innovative partnerships. As I did this morning, I want to make sure to thank the incredible finance and budget staff who spent hundreds of hours over the last few months to bring us to this point. They are not only focused on how to responsibly and strategically craft our plans for next year, they're also committed to ensuring that these budgets reflect our raised values, the direction from the Commission, and help us achieve our overarching mission and major goals. And they're doing it with some of our major systems down as they work on these systems as well, as we're covering those. And the presenters this afternoon are Kara Lease, our Interim Managing Director of Economic Development, and Kelly Zupon, Director of Maritime Finance and Budget.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Executive Director Metric. We will now present the Economic Development Division Operating Budget. I am joined with Interim Economic Development Manager Kara Lease, Diversity in Contracting Director Mian Rice, and Tourism Director Nick Leonti are available for questions as well. As I mentioned this morning, in late August, there was a reorganization which moved the real estate leasing portfolio, Pier 69 facilities, and the innovation manager to maritime. Economic development will retain management of the real estate development and planning, tourism, diversity and contracting, the Lower Duwamish Hub, and grant programs and other port initiatives. I'm going to turn it over to Kara Lease, who will discuss the division priorities and SWOT analysis.
Thanks, Kelly, and good afternoon, Commissioners. Executive Director Metric, I'm pleased to be with you to present our preliminary budget for the Economic Development Division of the Port of Seattle. You stole my line about small but mighty, but even with the reorg, we still have some really key features that keep the port moving forward. And particularly, with the goals of economic development, the way I look at the remaining aspects of this division is building. We're building buildings. We're helping to build careers, business opportunities, and communities, and a great visitor experience in Seattle, Washington. So those are our overarching goals. With our remaining divisions, I represent the real estate division in my day job, my usual job, as we continue to construct the Maritime Innovation Center and look forward next year to the construction of the uplands at T91. Continuing to support our airport with some exciting real estate opportunities at play, and maximizing the utilization of our existing seaport properties for even more great projects. We're focusing on bringing our diversity and contracting program to the next level. And when I say next level, we're talking about the percentage of businesses that represent a diverse portfolio of contracts and opportunities, building on the great success that we've had, and Mian Rice is here to talk about that if need be, and to continue some really strategic and impactful economic development partnerships, both supporting tourism and many other partnerships beyond what you've already discussed today, including our productive partnership with Maritime Blue and a number of our productive partnerships with various tourism organizations, the state and beyond, and continue to support other economic development agencies throughout the region. So those are our key priorities moving forward. Next slide, please. We're building on the great support that we've had. The Commission has consistently allowed us to be inventive and explore new ways to build economic development for many communities and continue to build a great real estate development portfolio through strategic planning, and we will continue that effort here. We're going to look at our partnerships in the grants that we make through the division for regional economic development throughout our communities, above and beyond, again, what we just explored with the South King County Fund. Proud to say we do have a talented team. But policies and regulations do impact port efficiency. We saw the retirement of Dave McFadden as our Managing Director for Economic Development earlier this year. And we're looking to Steve and the Commission and others in a good transition to a new leadership for the division in the coming months. And looking to explore diversity in contracting and some of the challenges that we face in improving our numbers there. But there are many opportunities that still exist. We believe that the Maritime Innovation Center, currently under construction, will be a factory for new maritime enterprise, and we will reap the benefit of doing that and perhaps see some of the businesses that come out of the Maritime Innovation Center coming into properties throughout the waterfront, including our new potential T91 Uplands project. But there's always room for improvement. I think Commissioner Fellman has been instrumental in us developing ecotourism and responsible tourism, and we are really at the starting line of some very terrific work there. We continue to look at the economy, the political framework that underlies all of our investments and our decision-making. We're buoyed by some of the changes in interest rates, even though that continues to be a threat as inflation does. And with the upcoming election, obviously, political uncertainty and impacts will be felt in labor markets and the real estate market. We have our eyes on that with our partners within our external relations division. So that sets us up for what I think is going to be a great year, but steady as she goes. A lot more strategic planning in terms of real estate is on board, so I will turn it back over to Kelly to get into the nuts and bolts of what we propose to spend money on in 2025. Kelly?
Thanks, Kara. Next slide, please. And this slide is a financial roll-up of the division. Like maritime and aviation, there's a lot of manual work being done due to the financial system outage, and we're likely to see some differences once the system is restored. I will do my best to explain out the financials for the reorganized division, but certain items we're not able to map over consistently. I'm hoping we can get those worked out a little bit before the final year end. The top table here gives a profit and loss statement view, including allocations that ties out to the Seaport profit and loss statement view that we showed earlier on one of the first slides this morning. The bottom is the roll-up of the economic development department expenses, which are higher, as half of those expenses typically get allocated out to either aviation or maritime, like diversity in contracting and some of the work Kira does in real estate, as two examples. I'll walk through the top first. The only revenue item remaining is about $3,000 budgeted for events at the Lower Duwamish Hub. For expenses, the only items applied to this division are tourism, economic development levy, and some economic development contingency items, which are the ones I'm trying to work out that didn't come over smoothly in the reorganization. Primarily, these economic development contingency items are for factor that we put in for open headcount or equity pay. Some of the higher expense growth is more a factor of costs that, like I said, don't map over. When you combine economic development, despite it being 36% growth on there, when you combine it with maritime, the combined are only 6% growth, so it's just a matter of sort of size and scale that's driving that figure. The bottom or department expenses provide a more accurate and slightly less confusing picture of the finances. Absent the reorganization anomalies tied to payroll, expenses grew about 10 to 12%. The bigger growth items, as you will see later in the presentation, are outside services related to real estate planning efforts and the expansion of the Washington State Tourism Contract and Tourism Grant Program with a 2-year cycle. I will move into the individual department budgets, starting with the diversity and contracting. The next slide, please. Okay. Diversity and contracting expenses are up 2% year over year. Payroll increased a little bit as we expect to have a full year of the Omnibudsman next year. That was planned to start in Q4 this year. Outside services are down, as I believe Mian can speak to a little more. I think we've completed or are completing the disparity study on there as well. So, next slide, please. The tourism budget is up 15% or $279,000 over 2024. You'll see those variance columns on the total. For some reason they didn't come through, but it's actually 279 variance and 15%. The increase is there's $200,000 that went up as part of the tourism market support went from a 1-year to a 2-year. So what happens is traditionally is when we do that, everybody does their matching grants at the very end. And so we expect to have a lot more matching grants next year. Additionally, there is a net $80,000 increase in our tourism contracts from 2024, which includes that $50,000 of funding for the Snoqualmie Responsibility Tourism Pilot that Commission had looked into as well. Next slide, please. And real estate development and planning is increasing the expense budget by about $486,000 in 2025. The growth is tied to $520,000 in the new request below. I think Kira may want to elaborate on some of those.
The new requests are substantially to look at the CEM property in West Seattle, which has been the subject of several RFPs to yield no development opportunities. But in coming years, we think that we need to look at that property critically in line with some of the other properties that we own in the West Seattle region and consider how we can light those parcels up, reconfigure them in a different way. So spending some money to study that is important for maritime design services and really to continue our effective partnership and extend our commitments to the Maritime Properties Unit, even though they're not part of our division anymore. As Stephanie's team has been building this planning division, we're working quite in sync. And we see that from that strategy, from that approach with planning, new projects in the Maritime Division and Maritime Lands will come forward, and we need to plan for those. And then overall, we've seen how fruitful our strategic planning has been as we've developed several chapters of our strategic plan for real estate over the time that I've been here at the port. We had our first real estate plan in 2016. Most of the recommendations from that early plan that hadn't been finished, we completed in and renewed in 2020, and you're now seeing the fruits of that. In fact, Maritime Innovation Center, the Uplands Project, and so forth were all part of that strategic planning. And now in 2023, we invested in a strategic plan for the aviation team outside of the SAMP projects. That's yielding some success. So I think it's time again, and then we did a small chapter working with Northwest Seaport Alliance and looking how we can improve and target priority developments or acquisitions to support our cargo business with the Northwest Seaport Alliance. So we did another chapter on that. It is time, in my opinion, given the economic climate and the successes of our past planning efforts, to pick up and do some additional planning in this next year that will set us on a course for the next 3 or 4 years of real estate planning, real estate strategic planning in line with our maritime and aviation partners. So back to you, Kelly.
Thanks. Next slide, please. The Economic Development and Innovation Partnerships is the administration wing of this group. Payroll is down. Primarily, we moved one of the innovation managers over to Maritime. Most of the rest of the costs are pretty flat from 2024, with the exception we did put a $50,000 investment in for the green economy there, along with a little bit of extra travel and as well. And next slide, please. Lastly, there are no new FTEs for the division. We did move a few through the reorganization to Maritime. And that's...
It's budgeted. Existing, we're not shrinking it by that.
Yeah. We've got a placeholder in there.
That's the last slide, right?
Yeah, I think we're up for some questions.
Okay, great. Thank you for the presentation. I will open it up for questions from my colleagues. Who wants to go first?
I got a couple.
Commissioner Fallman.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your last but not least. And I saw your cruise and stay was sort of in the tourism category. I think you had some mention of that, but obviously tourism and cruise are, I never understand like how cruise could like stand on its own. It's such a big part of the tourism program, but there is overlap there. But my question being, like this was yet another record cruise season. And, you know, if you really want to know what's going on in the world, the people that are the greatest experts are the cab drivers. So I had the reason to take a couple of cabs recently, and they said like this year was like half what last year was. That it was, and this was multiple drivers. And I was amazed. I go, but look, the cruise season is so big. And so they really felt, they weren't feeling the love of the cruise season. I'm just wondering, in terms of which brought up the question to me is, I know we put financial incentives to the cruise leases. How are we really evaluating the cruise and stay effectiveness?
Fake news, it's been a great cruise season. I think to answer the questions on that, maybe if Nick Leonti is online. Can you shed some light on the cruise and stay?
Hello. Yes, I am here. I'm currently attending the Washington State Tourism Conference in Vancouver, so just been monitoring the meeting here. For our department, cruise and stay, we want to get the maximum economic impact out of the cruiser, so we want them to spend as much time as possible on the land here in Seattle and throughout the region. So a lot of that isn't just the sheer number of cruisers, but how much time they're actually spending in the city itself, and where they're staying and where they're going. So I don't know how to answer to the cab drivers in this situation, but I think the numbers speak for themselves. I know we're getting some cruise passenger data from a survey we did in Juneau. We'll be getting those results soon, where we can see the average number of nights and the activities that cruisers do while they are in the area, but we don't have that quite yet. But it is a big part of our messaging and a big part of what we do. I can't speak to the agreements with cruise lines. Someone in Maritime may be better suited to speak to that, but as far as our marketing and what we try to do with cruisers, it's a big part of what we do, in addition to our general tourism promotion and our goal of keeping those flights full, keeping people coming through, and generating that visitor-related economic impact.
I do believe it's the surveys in Juneau I think are the primary way.
So, Madam President, if I can respond to
Yes, please.
to
Yes.
Commissioner Fellman on that. So I think it's the numbers are actually up. So it is interesting, that anecdotal to hear from the cab drivers, because I have heard from others as well, that it's been a good cruise season as far as impacting those small businesses and other aspects of business. So on that, so I think that is interesting.
I mean,
Data point
obviously
of
it's a
that
sample
when we
too.
know the overall numbers. The overall numbers are pretty high, and we expect a little bit higher than what we projected on that for the end of the season. But we'll look at that, especially as we roll into the end of the year, conclusion of cruise, and as we
It'd be
analyze
great
that.
to have that report out on that.
Yeah, if we're talking about anecdotal data, I live in Belltown and feel intimately connected with the business that's come off of the cruise line, since the folks come up to Belltown to dine, and it's, you can really tell the difference. So I think it is having a positive impact on downtown.
It was the comparison with last year was what, but
Yeah,
real
fair
quick,
enough.
T91 bike path, you might have heard something about this, and I just heard back from John Wolf that BNSF still has safety concerns, and I know you're pursuing other paths, but can we get a commitment to just go forward with the north pinch point and let the south pinch point, we've been using it as is for years. How do you plan to deal with this?
Twofold, and yes, and I'm actually missing a meeting today to talk about bifurcating the project as you're describing it. So what we're talking about is the T91 bike trail improvements to widen the bike trail for safety reasons. It's quite tight in 2 pinch points along that trail, along T91, and we've long held a plan to evolve those and get them bigger, and we've run into some challenges with BNSF's approval on their land that would allow us to strengthen or reduce the south pinch point. Yeah, we can bifurcate the project and just take the north pinch point down and near term and look at a longer term framework. I do have a plan B for the south pinch point as well, so we can discuss that in more detail. But yes, we do have a plan and a framework for that.
So we're budgeting to finally get that.
The issues here are not budgetary. We've always had plenty of money to do this relatively small construction project. It's really about the permissions that we've sought that we've run into difficult ground with, and so.
We've got the permits, we can just ignore BNSF at this point?
For the north pinch point, we don't have the permits because we have to have the full design in order to submit for the permits, but they are, I wouldn't say easily acquired, but on track. But yeah, we can bifurcate the project, and we have the funds to do the north pinch point in the near term. And I don't know what else to say about that.
I mean,
we can do
the
it.
difference between can and will.
Certainly, we will if we can.
Our that thing is like, I know that there's that was a great answer, by the way.
Happy New Year.
The art budget, and so we have a consultant report coming out. Can you give us a heads up of how we're trying to get the one port art program in order?
So I actually stepped off the art committee this year and can't give you an update on the consultant, but I can certainly see that you get one. I know that they were brought on. I don't have an update for you myself, but I know we've been doing that work.
So
We've also
have a 1% for art program as
We
part
do.
of our construction at the Maritime.
Correct. Yeah, and you were implementing it. I think we discussed we've got 3 major art projects going on in connection with our improvements to Fisherman's Terminal, and we actually explored expanding the budget for one of those programs in addition to the interpretive signage and the new wayfinding signage that we're going to find. So it'll be quite a new place, Fisherman's Terminal. We will also have 1% for our Uplands program as well, the T91.
Thank you, Commissioner Fellman. Any additional questions? Commissioner Calkins.
Just a quick comment to reinforce what I think I've said probably to you, Kara, 15 times, but the role of the real estate division in finding new opportunities for economic development and really leaning into our charter purpose of being an entity that preserves for public trust the control over these economic choke points that ports represent is really vital. So I'm so appreciative to have someone like you in this role, to be scanning constantly the landscape to see where there's opportunity to grab an asset, whether that's a real property asset or some other mechanism that will help to continue to supercharge our economy around here. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Great. Any additional questions or comments at this time? All right, hearing none, I'm going to move us along in the agenda. Thank you so much for the presentation. Appreciate you both.
Thank you as well.
Thanks.
Thank you both.
Thank you. All right. Item number 12. That concludes actually our business agenda meeting for the day. Are there any closing comments or motions related to committee from commissioners at this time?
Does the executive go first?
The executive goes after you.
Okay. All right. So one more time.
Go ahead, Commissioner Velleman.
You see, I missed the last meeting, so I'm making up for lost time. So I'd like to acknowledge, though, J.C. Harris's comment about the comment period on SAMP. You know, we understand that the 45-day period that we're getting is technically the most the FAA gives. But the point he brought up about the cyber issues and accessibility, I'm glad we brought up the point that we have to find a way to get everybody to know where to find that information. But, you know, we've had 5 years to develop it. I think we can give the public more than 45 days to review it. So but I think he brought up several reasons why I think it's justifiable. Steve and others, go ahead.
I can respond to that. Just, I mean, we could decide on that, and I think Mr. Metrick could consider that. I just want to say that we've been pretty responsive to the community's interest around SAMP, including just recently our external relations team did include Federal Way as one of the cities that will receive a briefing that wasn't originally a part of the plan, but that request came in, and we leaned in and included Federal Way. So there's not this, I just don't want this narrative to be created as if the port is not interested in hearing these comments and wanting to expand what it is that we can do. And so I think that's a good point as well, considering opening up the public comment period for a longer period.
Well, to your point, though, I think they originally proposed 30 days, and we've been advocating for 45. So it's not like I'm suggesting we're not trying to give the public, but 45 days is still, it's a big effort. But yes, the outreach we're doing, thank you for acknowledging the Federal Way inclusion. That's great. Getting back to the whole economic benefits of cruise and waterfront, the opening of the overpass, the overlook, was that an extraordinary thing? Yes, and then I just went back in the evening, and when that place is lit up, it is stunning. I mean, we had the sunset. It was, and I can't help but think that it's only going to be that much more a compelling reason for people to stay another day. So I think that was really great. A little personal privilege. So I just came back from a 3-week trip to Mozambique. It's the second time I spent a month in Tanzania 25 years ago. And just the overwhelming impression, I go there for the wildlife, but you're part of the surrounding communities, the sheer contrast between the natural and cultural wealth of this continent as compared to the poverty of the people. And it's so incredible how the governments are prepared to just exploit the natural resources, but not share that with the public. There's the education, the healthcare, the housing is so terrible, but it's not like they're just enriching themselves. The government is as corrupt as it gets, and the sons of presidents are poachers. You know, it just is ridiculous, and it just makes me feel that much more proud for the work that we do here, trying to share the love with the broader community, and the contrast just couldn't be more stark. So, last but not least, someday I'll give you a show and tell what I did for my summer vacation. I'd like to acknowledge it. I really express appreciation for Steve's acknowledgement of Rosh Hashanah, which was just a couple days ago, and it's actually the most holy Jewish holiday. It's the New Year, and by the way, the year is like, I forgot. I wrote it down. It's like 5378. I mean, it goes back a while. But it starts this whole time of reflection that culminates in Yom Kippur, where it's the one day of atonement. So it's not, we don't get every Sunday. you know, but it's so anyway, but it's really very important period of time where you reflect on your past mistakes, you think about how to make the world better going forward, and so I only wish I could close the door. And it's also, Yom Kippur is like the closing of the door of the year, right? I only wish we can close the door on the Middle East wars, and but just to reinforce the fact that not all Jews are Netanyahu supporters, and it just gets more and more nightmarish every day. So wanted to conclude on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fellman, for your comments. Any additional comments or thoughts from commissioners? Commissioner Calkins, go ahead.
I had an opportunity to spend a week in New York for Climate Week and the UN General Assembly, representing the Port of Seattle, and a couple of conversations about oceans, basically. And there's a ton to download, and I'm scheduled to do that with key staff on the various issues that we talked about. But I came back quite encouraged that we are going to take on, as a maritime sector, there's a seriousness to the conversations that wasn't evident even 5 or 6 years ago, and that industry, international entities, national level governments are finally really stepping up and taking it seriously, and all the more reason to push the accelerator to the floor on this so we can address it before it's too late.
Thank you, Commissioner, for those comments. Executive Director Metric, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, commissioners, for all your input today and your length of time you spent looking at the budget and your feedback and some questions there I think we want to answer as well. Let me comment on the comment period. That is controlled by the FAA, and so we can. I want to set expectations. We could ask for that. We have been working on that to get that as lengthy as possible so the public can comment. But I just want to reiterate that is a FAA decision on that length of that comment period. So. And I do want one final thing for Carol. We kind of skipped over there, except the ground lease on 106. We've been getting, that was a project that started with Dave McFadden, and Carol Lisa has carried that through. That's a $3 million revenue for us right now. Is they're looking for, Trammell Crow's looking for a tenant there, but that is a additional, on the budget that's substantial. And I appreciate that kind of thinking with the economic development, just like I think. Commissioner Calkins was saying, is it brings in more revenue, it allows us to do other things with that. So just wanted to note that as well.
Thank you, Executive Director Metric. On that point, do we have a timeline on the hiring of the new director for that position?
I just looked at the list. We're setting up the process right now and identifying the list of interviews for that. So we're talking, it's this, because the time set up in the travel schedules, it'll be before the end of this year.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any additional comments, committee referrals from commissioners? All right. Hearing no further comments and having no further business, if there is no objections, we are adjourned, and the time is now 2:48 p.m. Thank you all.